Welcome to another Battle of the Ports Remastered. This time, the third ever Battle of the Ports is getting the treatment. This is Makaimura, better known as Ghosts and Goblins. Released way back on July 7th, 1985, Capcom took arcade platforming up a notch with this spooky entry. You play as a brave knight named Sir Arthur, who must defeat zombies, ogres, demons, a cyclops, a dragon, and other monsters to rescue Princess Prin, who has been kidnapped by Astaroth, the king of Demon World. Along the way you can pick up new weapons, bonuses, and extra suits of armour. In Ghosts and Goblins, the player can only be hit twice before losing a life. Losing a life will result in having to restart the level, or starting at a halfway point if the player has reached it. Furthermore, the player will lose a life if the level is not completed within a set time limit. Yep, even then time limits were a bitch. After defeating the final boss, the player must then replay the entire game on a higher difficulty level to reach the genuine final ending. A staple of all main games in the Makaimura franchise. The first port of Ghosts and Goblins came to the Famicom on the 13th of June 1986. This port was handled by Micronix, and let's be honest here, for the time of release and considering the developer isn't known for great games, this is actually a very faithful port. We've got the arcade tunes, the game looks as close as it could have done at the time and plays pretty good as well. The only downside is that the enemy AI can be very cheap at times, resulting in some unfair deaths. Next came a few Western home computer ports or conversions in 1986, with all versions being handled by Elite Systems. Let's start off with the Amstrad CPC version. Now, I don't know what to think of this version. On one hand, we have a banging remix of the main theme, colourful graphics and responsive controls. I also like how Arthur's helmet bobs up and down. But on the other hand, the zombie AI is pathetic. They just keep constantly spawning from the same spot. You also die in one hit, making the game super tough. I couldn't even complete stage 1. A noble attempt, but overall, a bit crap. Next up is the Commodore 16 version, or in my case, the Commodore Plus 4 version. The Commodore Plus 4 was the very first computer I ever owned, but what do I think of its version of Ghosts and Goblins? Well, the graphics are okay, I guess, although Arthur looks pretty poor. Sadly, the game doesn't play very well, making for one very sad attempt. Still, at least there was a version for the C16 and Plus 4 owners. Arcade ports were quite rare on those machines. Sticking with Commodore, but this time the C64. This is yet another good effort. While the music is fitting, I'd rather have the arcade music, but I guess this new stuff will do. The graphics are pretty good and easily recognisable as Ghosts and Goblins. Even the gameplay is good. Nice responsive controls, but maybe a little slippery at times. Overall, a very nice port for the hardware. ZX Spectrum time, starting off with the quite derpy looking title screen. Thankfully, the main game isn't that bad. It is responsive and follows the arcade stage layout. It's just a shame there is no music, and that the way the zombies rise from the ground is rather annoying, as it's tricky to know when you will or will not take damage from them. Still, a reasonable effort on the specky. In July of 1987, we saw the NEC PC 8801 port hit the Japanese market thanks to ASCII. This is the first Japanese PC port we are taking a look at, and to be honest, it's not too bad considering the capabilities of the PC 8801. This is a business PC after all, hence why the scrolling is bloody awful. Still, despite this, the game plays reasonably well if you can get over the scrolling. The audio is also a reasonable reincarnation of the arcade game. It's not going to win any awards, but it could have been a lot worse. Pacific DataWorks International were in charge of the American 1987 MS-DOS release, and holy shit is this bad. The game plays nothing like it should. Arthur slides all over the place and must now be on the moon judging from the way he jumps. The stages are vaguely based upon the arcade game, but you can basically just plow right through them with very little effort. Just as well, since the many sudden death drops will have you losing lives like crazy. Graphically, it isn't too bad, but why does Arthur look like Mr. Big Nose when he loses his armour? And why do the ghosts look like flying headless skinned chickens? Such a bizarre port. 1990 saw the release of the very popular Amiga port from Elite Systems. Now this is a game that Amiga fans are very proud of, and so they should be. What a great port we have here. It looks good, sounds good, and plays good. Now it may not be as fast as the arcade, and the controls are stiffer, but for the time and hardware, this is a very good attempt. We get music and sound effects simultaneously. We get a game that follows the arcade well. We get a game that moves smoothly most of the time, and most of all, we get a game that is faithful to what it is trying to replicate. It just goes to show that there are some good arcade ports on the Amiga. Not many, but they do exist. Elite here again with the ST port. I can imagine many people thinking the Amiga version was a port of the ST game, but in fact the ST version is completely different. But is it better than the Amiga? Well, it sure plays faster and it looks pretty, but sadly it isn't as good to play due to the playing field being more zoomed in. It's very possible to drop down onto an enemy because you can't see it, whereas in other ports you would be able to. Also, the collision detection is a little unfair in that you are hit when you shouldn't be. Still, not a bad version, but it could have been better. In January 2000, Digital Eclipse brought Ghosts and Goblins to the Gameboy Colour, and I can't believe I'm actually saying it's a good port. Yeah, it slows down like crazy, but it's running on the Game Boy. Yeah, sometimes enemies blend in with the background, but again, it's running on the Game Boy. You could do a lot worse than this port, that's for sure. Also, I like the password feature, so you don't have to worry about going through the entire game in one sitting. In 2004, a mobile Java version came out from Capcom. This is a bit buggy as the music can cut off if you die. As for how it plays, well, it's okay for the mobile game, but it certainly won't knock the Game Boy Color version from its throne. Later in the year, Capcom released Ghosts and Goblins Gold for Western mobile phones. This is the exact same game as previously, but now with the audio bug fixed, new music, and a whole new stylized look. The actual gameplay and stage layout is identical to the previous release though. September 23rd, 1998 saw the release of the Saturn version on Capcom Generation 2, known as Makai Tokishi, which basically means Demons and Knights. In Europe this was called Chronicles of Arthur. As to be expected, this is a near identical port of the arcade game. The resolution is a little different, meaning there's a little cut off to the left and right of the screen, but just like with the other games on the collection, you'd never notice unless someone pointed it out. As for how this port plays, well, it's sublime. The controls are super responsive and feel just like the arcade game. There's nothing to complain about with this port. Released on the same day as the Saturn port, we have the PlayStation version, also developed by Capcom. As we saw with the Ghouls and Ghosts Battle of the Ports video, the PlayStation game is rather dark, but it does give the player slightly wider screen view than the Saturn, due to the PlayStation's resolution being closer to the arcade original. And now for some bonus games. These shouldn't really be featured, but what the heck, it's a nice bonus. We'll start off with what is known as Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins in English. This PSP entry is loosely based upon the original game, but now contains aspects of Ghouls and Ghosts and Super Ghouls and Ghosts, as well as original ideas. As you can see, it is a very nice looking game and also fun to play. The original Ghosts and Goblins is also on the PSP, but that's just emulation. Nothing interesting there. Here's one you may not know. This is Makaimura for WonderSwan. Or in other words, Ghosts and Goblins for WonderSwan. Yep, Bandai's Japan only portable game console also got a release. This is more loosely based upon Super Ghouls and Ghosts than anything else. And we'll finish up the bonus games with Ghosts and Demons, a tribute for the 30th anniversary of Ghosts and Goblins for PC, built using the Beats of Rage engine, believe it or not.
Send forth the horns! I will slay them!
The eagle-eyed amongst you have probably already noticed that this is a souped-up port of the WonderSwan game. And what an excellent game it is too! Highly recommended! And let's take a look at all those versions of Ghosts and Goblins Makaimura running side by side.